The subject for our talk today is the question of divine personality. For as you know, it has been a long drawn-out battle among the philosophers whether personality is earlier, is the primal truth, or impersonality. Modern thought is generally one in pointing to a kind of impersonal force being the author of all the universe. There is an unmistakable tendency to reduce everything to some force, a force out of which everything issues. Even those who invest this force with some kind of consciousness or awareness, point out that this conscious force also expresses itself through a number of subsidiary forces, operates through a set of impersonal laws. This is the trend of modern thought. Ancient thought also, starting from the other end, the end of spirit, reduced everything to some ineffable spirit. It went on to point out that this world and all its movements are derived secondarily or even further from an original impersonal something which they would not name for want of some designating term. They simply said that, capital that. Now this background is found to be very disturbing to a devotee of God who likes to conceive of God in terms of a person who listens to his prayers, who receives his offerings of love, who reveals himself to his soul. He is told by the so-called philosophers of the path of knowledge that if that helps you, you keep it, impliedly meaning that it is a crutch. This belief in personality, in a divine person, is a helpful crutch for the devotee to walk with till he acquires enough strength to face the truth that all that he was worshipping is only a mental fiction. But to the devotee, whatever the conclusions of reason, whatever the proofs of the logical intellect, to him nothing is more vivid, more real than the fact of the person, a divine person, around whom his whole life is organized. He has no patience with the arguments of the philosopher who prove to him that what the intellect perceives and determines is alone real and not the weak sentiment of his emotions. To the integral seeker, however, these two opposing approaches do not have much relevance, for he neither depends on his logical mind nor on the effervescence of his emotional being for feeling his way to the ultimate truth. It is his own spiritual experience and the experience, authentic experience of those who have gone before him that are the standard by which he determines his life. To him, the fact that his love, his devotion is accepted by him or her to whom he offers is an incontrovertible fact. In fact, he prefers to put by the philosophical reason and mind as something irrelevant to him before the urgency and the vividity with which the personality of the divine makes an impact on him. Sri Aurobindo points out that in these matters neither the intellect nor the way of the heart as it functions are enough. Both are to be guided by a superior faculty, intuition. Each one of us, whether we have that intuitive faculty functioning in us normally or not, have moments when we receive certain intuitive feelings and flashes which we first accept and later try to justify or explain to ourselves with the aid of the intellect, try to have corroborated by our experience. And this intuition, which Sri Aurobindo describes elsewhere as an arrow of truth, may reveal itself in any part of the being. Intuition may send its flashes to the intellect. The warmth of intuition can make itself felt in the heart. Even the life force has its own intuitive feeling. The body also has its intuition. And the experience of this intuition confirms the truth of personality. When we look into ourselves, it does not need much of a proof to understand or to realize that we are not just a bundle of sensations, feelings, thoughts. It is not either that there is that bubble of ego which centralizes all these thoughts, feelings and movements and gives us the illusion of a personality. When we look into ourselves objectively, we realize that within us there is an individual whose shadow is the ego. Long before thought could move into thoughts, feelings can form, there is somebody there who projects the thought. Whose is the thought? Whose is the feeling? So the fact of our personality is interior to the obvious fact of our thoughts and feelings, which are, comparatively speaking, impersonal. They may center themselves around objects, but they are impersonal movements, universal movements that pass through ourselves. The real factor that organizes these universal and impersonal movements around itself and grows on their essence is the soul personality. The soul indeed has many personalities. On each level of the being, the soul projects, the central soul projects itself as the mental being, the emotional being, the vital being, the subtle physical being, and the physical being. But everywhere there are so many projections of one person. This is the truth of each one of us. Much more with the divine reality of which we are pale, incomplete reflections. It is this perception of the reality of person and personality in the divine existence that has led Indian seers to speak of Brahman with personality and Brahman as the impersonal. In Sanskrit terms, it is the Saguna Brahman and the Nirguna Brahman. He is the one with full personality. The whole universe is conceived as his body. Behind is he, picturesquely described in the Veda as the thousand-headed person, the cosmic person, who projects himself, one-fourth of himself in the universe, with the rest of him transcending the world, this creation. He is the person. What of the impersonal? One may ask. Adherents of this philosophy of Saguna Brahman point out that the impersonal is the stuff out of which the person manifests. It is a formless, shapeless stuff which he builds into so many personalities of himself. So without the person, the impersonal has no practical consequence. To this, the champions of the impersonal point out that it is because the impersonal reality is there that so many personalities can be projected. Personality is a consequence, is a formation of the impersonal. It is possible that the person may go, the personality may disappear, but that into which the personality disappears continues. It is adopting this logic, incontrovertible when looked at by itself, that the philosopher went on by successive elimination of forms, of personalities, to arrive at three terms. They said the ultimate reality reduces itself to existence, consciousness and bliss. Some were more daring, and they said even bliss is not the final impersonality, because there are states of being where you do not feel or realize or experience the bliss. Yes, said others, but there are also states of being where you don't feel or experience the consciousness. So both bliss and consciousness were eliminated from the race towards the determination of the ultimate, and only existence remained, a sense of being, for without it there is nobody to argue and nobody to convince. A sheer, ineffable existence. But that was not the end. It was left to Buddha to complete the logical process. He went a step further. Then he said, why? Why do you say that existence is the final truth? You can as well conceive a state when even what exists, the state of existence, lapses into something which you can't call existence. This is not imagination. In one's own quest of the self, quest of the truth, inwards, one does have glimpses of a state when the very conception of existence collapses. There are remarkable passages in the epic Savitri by Sri Aurobindo, where he describes the all-enveloping, all-swallowing states of the nihil, of the zero, of the nullity, where nothing is. It is a zero, maybe an empty zero, or maybe a zero that is ineffable. Thus, the Buddhists, pursuing the path of the logical intellect, abolished even existence as the ultimate truth. Naturally, this sort of extreme position could not hold itself for long, and then arose the question, existence, but whose? There can't simply be a state unless there is a being of which there is a state. So they again started and spoke of the existent. If there is an existence, it is an existence of something, some reality. That reality is the existent. And if this existent reality, real, is conscious, this consciousness also cannot just be a rarefied state of awareness. It is a dynamic state. It has a will of its own. It is out of this will that all projection comes to be. So they spoke of the conscious being. Then what about delight? Because where there is consciousness, where there is a conscious existence, there is an ebullition of delight. So there also, it was pointed out by those who had the experience that bliss is not just a state. There is a being, blissful being, an Anandamaya Purusha, who upholds the whole cosmos. The reaction of bliss, the movement of bliss, proceeds from a conscious, blissful being. And all these aspects of the existent, the conscious being, the blissful person, Purusha, they were concretized in the conception and figure of Krishna in Indian philosophy, the Lord of delight, who accepts the love of the devotee. Indeed, in the beginning, different religions had different approaches to this conception of the Godhead. Originally they conceived of the divine person as a magniloquent addition of man. They endowed him with all the qualities of the human being, though on exaggerated scale: caprice, anger, sense of justice, sense of righteousness. But in course of the development of consciousness and mind, certain difficulties came to be presented in the explanation of the working of the universe. They had to account for many ungodly things that are taking place in the universe, which could ill square with their definition of the Godhead. Some philosophies erected the fiction, I won't say fiction, the conception of the devil, on whose head they laid all the blame for all that goes wrong in the universe, reserving for God the credit for all that is good. Some religions endowed man himself with that capacity to go counter to the will of God and start his career in sin. As maturity developed in the human mind, some devised the conception of nature as responsible for all that is uncomplimentary to God. But looked at from a broader and a larger standpoint, there is really no necessity to devise these explanations to save God from the responsibility of all that goes wrong in the universe. In the chapters of Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo points out how the whole problem changes its complexion. Once you accept that the divine is not something supracosmic, creating the universe and sitting above there, watching what goes on, delivering judgments, but the divine is a reality which not only creates the universe but enters into it. In the Upanishads it is clearly pointed out, having created, he enters into it. He indwells the universe, and all that happens, it is he who bears the burden. Whether in you or in me or in a plant, it is the divine that suffers. It is the divine that joys. We are only the outer instrumentation for working, for effecting changes, for the drawing of the sap of delight. Pain and pleasure are only terms, positive and negative, of the experience derived by the God in the course of his manifestation. The point is, the divine is manifest in this universe not merely as force, not merely as consciousness, but as a person, as a personality who takes cognizance of our needs, who accepts our offerings, who notes our aspirations and directs his grace. There is someone, some person, divine person, relating himself to each form, presiding over each movement, and that gives meaning to every little thing that happens. If all were fathered, all were conducted by some impersonal movement, impersonal force, what's the meaning of human striving? Each movement that man has a corresponding truth in the divine. What is the ultimate truth of love? Is it possible to love an impersonal reality? One can contemplate, one can dwell in stillness on an impersonal peace, calm, but love cannot be still. Love is vibrant, love is dynamic. It insists on flowing towards its objective. Love is meaningless without the beloved, and the beloved is irrelevant where there is no lover. The fact is, both the personal and the impersonal are two aspects of the same reality. From the human end, they are two gates opening on the same divine reality. Sri Aurobindo puts it picturesquely when he describes them as two wheels, two eternal wheels on which the human soul travels. Parallel wheels which oppose to human logic, but in pursuance of their own logic do meet in infinity. If the mind finds its summum bonum in certain of its moods, in an impersonal peace and silence, the heart also claims a rounded fulfillment to its emotions, to its stirrings of love, to its stirrings of self-giving, self-expansion, self-surrender. Around whom is this love to be organized if there is not a divine person? Depending upon our approach, the divine reveals himself, the divine reveals itself, now as the person, now as the impersonality. But in whichever way we come to experience the divine, both are the truths. Commonly, the divine impersonality is the truth for the jnanin, for the seeker by the way of knowledge, at any rate in the beginning. But for the seeker of the way of devotion, the way of love, the divine personality is the all-sufficing truth. Even the worker on the path of the divine, who starts originally with tuning his will to the divine will, ultimately realizes that that will is of the Lord of works. Similarly, the seeker on the path of knowledge, after he grounds himself sufficiently well on the foundation of immutable, indefinable, ineffable silence and peace, he becomes aware that this peace, this calm, is but a mood of a transcendent being, what the Gita calls the Purushottam. As Sri Aurobindo points out, it is a capital contribution of the Gita to the human thought in positing the existence of the transcendent Purusha, the transcendent in whom are reconciled the mobile and the immobile aspects. the dynamic and the static, the impersonal and the personal. Both are true. Both may appear as contraries, but there is a level of consciousness, a level of existence, where both reveal themselves as complementary truths, reconciled in the totality of a transcendent existent Purushottama, for whom the personal and the impersonal, the mobile and the immobile, the static and the dynamic are terms of manifestation, polarities, the two ends through which all manifestation has to pass. As far as the yoga of love is concerned, the divine personality is the first truth. The truth of impersonality can only be the background, can only be the base, and the personality is the fine flower which the human soul adores. I think friend Ross could help with some questions.
I like very much what you said. The reasoning about philosophers going through in and out.
Really on this theme, but anything else which could interest our friends who have gathered.
Sri Aurobindo says that high state, that which is underlying both personal and personal,
Yes.
is experienceable.
Yes. It is not knowable in the mental way, but it can be realized. It can be known by identity. Even the transcendent person, the transcendent state, can be realized. Difficulty is in traditional yogas, one knows, one arrives at identity with it only in the peaks of trance. When comes back, one knows, remembers something, but he can't translate that experience into mental terms. What Mother emphasizes is the need to build a bridge step by step from our normal state of existence to the highest possible peaks of trance experience, so that what is experienced there is communicated without dilution, without gaps, to this normal consciousness. Whether I can put it in mental terms is another matter. But that experience, she says, where the individual existence, the cosmic existence, and the transcendent are held together as in the divine, so in the human representation also, is possible.
Also, another question? When we talk about Satchidananda, Sri Aurobindo was saying that there's a suggestion that there's a lower Satchidananda, they call it, and a higher, but that is not really true. That the lower Satchidananda, for example, one can experience the physical consciousness, go out infinitely wide into that stage of eternal consciousness. But on the physical, also on the emotional, life, and the mental. But then he says that the supermind is the self-conscious state of the absolute, wherein the higher stage of Satchidananda can be experienced. In other words, whereby there is now the awareness not of just the impersonal, but also of the personal state, and or of the creation, and of its nature. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about these levels and how they go about.
Actually, the higher triple Satchidananda, when we speak of the lower Satchidananda, it means it is a reflection. It is a reflection of the higher of the Satchidananda in the physical matter or the life or the mind. That is described as experiencing the Satchidananda at the different levels. It is only a self-projection by way of reflection. Only after the consciousness is built up to cross into the supramental belt, that one comes into touch directly with the being of Satchit Ananda, because there it stands marshaled and organized on its move towards manifestation. Here what we experience is a reflected Satchidananda. There it is the original Satchidananda.
The Satchidananda has in its nature the basic essentiality. And when one experiences it, let's say on the physical plane, or any one of the lower planes, if he's doing it by reflection, then he doesn't know by identity. So he hasn't reached the consciousness level that uses identity yet, in the sense of supramental.
No. When one has the realization of Satchidananda in the physical, you will find number of yogis, saints in India who have realized what may be called the delight aspect of the Satchidananda, who have realized the consciousness aspect, Chit, of Satchidananda. At their level, at their unregenerate level of mind, at their crude physical level, they do not know anything else. But it is true that they emanate those vibrations and they live in that bliss. It is the projection, or what I would say the reflection of Ananda aspect in the physical, which they have realized in their gross trance. They are satisfied, they stay put, they do not have the illumination or anywhere the consciousness, the truth consciousness of the supermind. They do not. And that is why you will find them dynamic, of course, but not illuminating.
But are they aware of the eternal state?
They are. That particular state they are eternal, just as it is possible to realize the immortal condition of the life force of certain, the mentality in certain concentrations. Similarly, they are in contact or they have realized those higher states as reflected in their lower levels. But their evolution stops there.
They think they've got it.
There is currently in India a lady called Anandamayi. Nobody who comes into her atmosphere or aura can escape feeling the sense, the joy of existence, the delight of existence. And when somebody asked Sri Aurobindo in the 30s about her attainment, showing her photograph, he said clearly, she has realized here the Satchidananda experience. She has the Satchidananda consciousness. That means Satchidananda consciousness that is possible in this physical body, which has not yet evolved beyond the belt of the lower triple ignorance. Staying in ignorance, it is possible. Staying in this body, not doing yoga, it is possible for Whitman or another poet to have a mental experience or realization of the cosmic divine. But it stays there. It does not make any difference to his heart, to his way of thinking. It is a mental realization. There can be a physical realization, a vital realization. But a realization of the soul in terms of evolution is quite different. There are many who stop on the wayside by stumbling across these partial, limiting realizations and cancel themselves out of the evolutionary process. For them, that is the sole truth. Because if they were to concede that there could be any other truth, they can't stop that.
Do you care to talk anything about the double identity? That is, how the Absolute knows itself by immanence, and also by that which exceeds itself, inclusive
Yes.
consciousness.
Yes. I would say it is a triple identity, not even double identity. Because the divine, as related to manifestation, has a triple status, of which it is simultaneously conscious. It indwells in man, in the individual, in a form. It is also present on a universal scale. At the same time, it is conscious that both its individual status and the universal status derive from its transcendent status. This is true of God, of divine, but there is nothing wonderful in it. But it is possible for man, for you and I, to realize this state. And that is the speciality of the soul within us. Because that soul is in one way the divine inhabiting this body. At a deeper level, It is one with the self that is inhabiting the whole universe. Still deeper, it has its own communication with its highest Godhead, which is transcendent above the universe. It is because all these three are held together in it that spiritual evolution is possible for the soul from the present state to the transcendent. It is a question of triple identity of God, of the divine, being repeated in each individual.
That wasn't exactly what I meant. When you have a form, creation of, say, a world or a human being, God is immanent in that
Yes.
and as that, in the timeless sense, but as being. Then, according to Sri Aurobindo, there is that which exceeds that form,
Yes.
can penetrate and look in and experience without being attached to it.
It is possible because there are two statuses of the same reality. What she describes in Savitri as the eternal looking into time, eternal pouring itself into time. The simultaneity of experience, the possibility of having more than one way of existence because of multiple levels of existence, that makes possible for the divine to be immanently conscious as also conscious transcendentally. It is just as it is possible for you now to be talking to me in Pondicherry in the ashram, but at the same time there is something which is always aware that your home is there 5,000 miles away. You come from the United States. Both the states, both the knowledge, kinds of knowledge do not conflict with each other because they are on different levels. Whole life and creation is organized not on one level. The Veda speaks of 7 levels. The whole art of yoga and spiritual progress is to become more and more conscious of these increasing levels of existence. I am very fond of repeating everywhere what Sri Aurobindo has said, that man is like an iceberg. He represents only 1/10 of his being. He is conscious only of 1/10 of his consciousness. The rest is sunk behind the appearance. To increase this area of consciousness, to bring out into the open more and more hidden layers of his being, that after all is the meaning of yoga.